Hey everyone, Rudros here, and bringing you a state of the game discussion with someone who I've gotten to know on the Discords for quite a while. This is my first time getting to really have an in-depth conversation with him, Mr. Lance Pierson. Lance, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing all right. At least I think so.
Oh, no. Well, yeah, and this was your idea. You wanted to reach out, and you said you had a few things to get off your chest that you want to mention, so I'm curious to see what you have to say. So, how long have you been playing the game?
Let's see. I've been playing the game for about a year, almost 2 years now. I started collecting about 2 years ago, but I first opened up my pack about 3 to 4 years ago, actually around Opus 2, Opus 3.
Oh, wow. So you had some early cards.
I pulled a Legend Tifa from Opus 2, so I was happy.
Nice. That's awesome. And what scene are you in?
I'm in the Charleston scene, from Charleston, South Carolina scene for Final Fantasy.
Nice. And how's the Charleston scene doing these days?
Well, the Charleston scene has seen its share of difficulties and its share of successes. So if you didn't know, I brought some of my friends from the Charleston scene to go to Re-Raise 1, down there.
The Florida one?
Castleberry, all that.
Yeah.
And we inadvertently caused an incredible amount of shenanigans.
Oh, really? What happened?
Let's see. So my best friend Joey, who went with me, I would say he's the best player in our scene. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Best player when it comes to cards and the best deck builder. He almost made it top 16 in his first event with pure Braska burn. So, which is fantastic for a guy who only ran one backup in his entire deck, and it was moving.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
And my other friend Justin, who said, and I quote, "I hate this game. I'm never going to play it again," also made it the same amount of space to the same placing as Joey did with Folka.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, the water list.
And he caused most shenanigans because he dropped when he was 4-2. So he caused seeding shenanigans in the bracket because he dropped. And he would have won and then been top 16. Then we would have to stay an extra night, even though we already had the reservations for the extra night.
What made him drop? Did he just think he hadn't made it, or?
Oh, no. I've already prefaced this. He hates the game. He doesn't enjoy it. I offered to pay for everyone to go down. So not only did I pay for everybody to go down, I paid for his entry. So I have 2 Matarasu promos right now. And my foil Matarasu, my Thieves deck. But we'll get to the Thieves deck later on. Hopefully not.
Wow. So he hated the game when he made top 16 potentially anyway. That's pretty funny.
I mean, the Charleston scene is actually really good for games like Yu-Gi-Oh! And stuff like that. Mm-hmm. South Carolina is actually one of the biggest Yu-Gi-Oh! Scenes in terms of YCS. YCS as in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship Series.
Yeah.
The Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship turn-ups for YCS, and South Carolina is the second largest in the entire country of North America. So our scene still has some really good players for all the card games here. Yu-Gi-Oh!
Gotcha.
Magic, Digimon, Vanguard. Justin, good guy. He was also a judge for Bushy Road for the longest time, and he's familiar with Vanguard in particular, and is actually really good at it. So Final Fantasy, you may not like it, he's still really good because the damage works pretty similarly.
Yeah. Interesting. Is there a particular reason like he doesn't like it? Is it just he doesn't care about the IP or the mechanics, or?
Well, it's actually comeback. So other card games like say Vanguard. Well, actually, Vanguard's a very good comparison because the damage works similarly, and you still have your front row and your back row. Mm-hmm. The people attacks and your attackers and your backup line, even though it's rear guards, your back row. In Vanguard, your deck building for each deck requires you have 16 trigger units, or 14 to 16. I don't really recall, but
I've never played Vanguard, so yeah, I don't know.
Oh, that's fine. It's fantastic explanation. Your trigger units are EX burst.
Oh, okay.
Which do a set thing when they're checked as damage, or you check them to attack. Let's just go to check the damage. So he thinks that Final Fantasy doesn't have enough comeback mechanics because EX burst, as it is, don't do enough in his opinion.
Mm.
So in order to build a good deck, sometimes you might not just have a good enough EX line to make it so that your comeback is, you can come back from things,
Mhm.
like, which I feel is a fair analysis. There are some matchups that sometimes feel impossible if you don't have a good enough EX line. Then deck building without the right EXs can be pain in the ass as well too. But pardon my French.
No, quite all right. You're more than welcome to swear. It's funny you mentioned EX bursts because I actually have a video about those coming out hopefully sometime in the near future once I get done working on it, doing a lot of editing. But no, that's interesting. So you mentioned your friend and why he didn't like it. Obviously, you play the game. Sounds like you were pretty into it. Tell me, what are some of your thoughts on the current state of the game, where it's at? Because you reached out to me and you said, man, there's some things I want to say. So let me hear some of these thoughts of yours.
Okay, so where do I begin? Let's see. We can start at casual play versus competitive. The lack of real drafting for any of the sets.
Well, let's start with competitive then, since you mentioned that. So we've had these re-raise events. We had about 5? We had May, June, July, August, and September, and then there'll be the Canadian one in October, and then that one in November. So about 5, 6, 7. What are your thoughts on that? How have you felt visiting them, going to them, etc.? Wherever you want to start with that.
Allow me to start with my experiences at Re-Raise 1.
Sure.
Let me apologize to Mr. Santiago, who I accidentally almost took his Shantoto by accident after I played Mind Flayer, after I cast Mind Flayer and cast a Shantoto off the top of his deck. Allow this to be on video now. Me apologizing the second time for that. I was playing Sky. So what I want to say, the community is very receptive, and very opinionated when it comes to Final Fantasy, the card game. And being someone who plays a lot of card games, that's to be understandable. There are people who say we shouldn't have ban lists at all for the game, that there shouldn't be any bans, stuff like that. Bans are unhealthy for the game. There are people who talk about, that some cards deserve to be banned, that this was before Moshri got hit. I was a very, very, very big advocate for Moshri getting hit. Reason, you cannot interact with the card at all without it. Even at 1 is a card where you cannot you can't interact with it with an EX burst. Regardless, but all in all, Final Fantasy community has some good fun. We all have some good fun. We had some fun times. I played Sky Pirates. I realized, man, Sky Pirates aren't that fun. I'm just going to end up playing Thieves. Now I have Thieves. Now Thieves are fun for me, but not fun for anyone else. So from a competitive standpoint, I think Final Fantasy is doing fine. I think the ban list could be a little tighter, not to sell more product, but because there are some problem cards that feel like they shouldn't be. They're cards that I feel like, because of Hobby Japan's stance on playing cards and being able to play cards, that shouldn't exist, or rather their usage and their availability.
Can you give me an example? Like, can you give me an example of a card?
Well, look, I've already talked about Moshri. Let's be honest about Moshri. Moshri and every deck that used it was absolutely the most frustrating thing about that deck.
Sure.
My best friend, like I said, he played Braska. And the entire time of us playing, mind you, from the time the custom deck came out, he built Braska. Sky Pirates were still a tier 1, tier 0 deck. In some circles, just to call it tier 0. But still a tier 1 deck where it's very formidable. I was still playing a good summon line, a good forward line. I still had the Bismarck. I still had the Leviathan. But when my opponent drops down a Braska, and only a Braska, and has 5 cards in hand, and then all of a sudden my forward line dies. You see what I'm saying? Like, Hobby Japan's policy is that in order, both players should be able to play cards.
Yeah,
they should be able to play these cards. They should be able to enjoy the game. I don't feel like Braska in itself is the problem, but I feel it is a problem that they've wrote themselves into, if that makes sense. Like, you're writing a book and all of a sudden you hit a plot hole and you have to fix it, but you don't want to fix it because you have to write the next part. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand. So you're basically writing yourself into a corner. So with Braska, is it just kind of his efficiency of that, hey, I can turn any summon into my hand into a 7k ping?
It's more so Broska is the perfect example of Hobby Japan's card design getting better and better for 2-cost forwards.
Yeah, stuff certainly has gotten cheaper. That's no denying that.
Laswell being one of the best, one of the best going second cards in the game, one of the best ice forwards in the game. Let's see here, Broska being one of the best burn cards in the game, having one of the most absolutely ridiculous effects I've ever seen in a card game. Period. Because with deck building, he's free.
Yeah.
He trades with a lot of things. Anything that's 3-drop 7K, a 4-drop 7K with a really good effect. Let's see, even with the right setup, he trades with a lot of 4-drop 8Ks, 6-drop 8Ks. Bond, let's talk about, he hits a lot of things and it makes it practically unplayable. Even then, he's still in a element that says, hey, I don't care about your inherent protection. You have access to Amaterasu, all this. It's he's a very good card. That's not to say that he's not. Hey, this is busted. This needs to be banned. It's more of a. This is kind of like. Boss is a good card. I feel like at a competitive standpoint, it's fine, but casually, it is a very toxic card game. So a lot of people want to say the game is dying, but we have to think about what people do in their free time playing the game, casually. The competitive scene is doing great, and nobody's going to argue about it. We have re-raise events, we have reunions. There's locals that have 10, 20 people. But what about people who just want to join and play the game? I'm set up. My best friend's set up. We have our friend Benji down the street who we play with quite often. He's set up. He has his collection. He has his decks. Warrior Light deck, which is really fun, incredibly annoying when you see 7 forwards dropped.
I do miss that deck. I love playing that deck.
I mean, that deck probably dies with Shadow Lord existing, but
yeah, as do many a tribal. But go ahead.
Oh no, feel free. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I was gonna mention on the casual standpoint was that probably since I've been playing, I don't think it's ever really fun to go against a deck where essentially it feels like you can't do anything, and Broska kind of has one of those cards in that if you're trying to play something fair or fun, and if you can't remove that Broska, it is a deflating feeling of like, wow, any forward I put out just dies before anything gets to happen. If I'm playing, I don't know, Orphan and Ice Discard, and I have to get to my attack phase for him to actually do something, it's frustrating when your opponent can go, okay, well, before you go to attack phase, boom, boom, he's dead.
Here's two Ifrits, and I have it Frida in hand to be able to kill the rest of your stuff.
Yeah.
It's very frustrating, but it's also a fair card in a competitive sense, because competitively you want to have the most consistent, most busted stuff, be able to play against people who are also going to be playing this way.
Yeah. Well, and I remember at that first re-raise, was it the first one? I know there was one, maybe it was the Texas one. A Broska list did fairly well. Maybe it was Sam Toole's list. It was like Firewind. It got pretty high up there. Yeah.
And then we had Pure Broska recently come in second after I said, Broska's really good. Don't be sleeping on this deck. And guess what happened? Everyone slept on the deck. And all of a sudden, I get to say, I told you so to you, and especially you.
Yeah, he's absolutely strong. Well, was there anything else you want to mention about the competitive? Like mentioning more about Florida, or just how you felt about re-raise in general?
If I were to talk more about Florida re-raise, it'd be more so that I saw more Folka there than I ever want to see in my life. And Moshri dying also killed the deck, because you can't just bounce everything. But also Folka goes back to the same issue that Hobby Japan stance on. You should be able to play cards, and having all your cards bounce back to your hand is technically makes Folka a proponent of turbo discard, because you still have to discard cards to play cards, and if you don't have forwards, you can't deal damage.
Yeah. Well, and kind of going in with this, and it's similar with the Broska thing, is that at some point you have to be able to attack. There's very little alternate ways of winning in this game, so at some point you have to be able to commit a forward and attack, and it also invalidates things like haste, something that says, hey, I can attack immediately, but it doesn't really matter, because you still have to go to your attack phase and go to your attack declaration step, and if you have something like Folka, like Broska, that can wait till that 11th hour and say, okay, it's gone, I've basically ruined your attack declaration step, now you got to wait a whole nother turn. I do understand why that's a very frustrating feeling, because it's like, well, I can't do anything if I can't ever actually commit an attack to the board.
Oh, yeah. And that's also something I wanted to bring up from a casual standpoint. We've had, my locals have done pretty well. We've had 8-10 man locals on a scene that was dead for sets. Like my entire scene prior to us reviving our scene around Opus 12 stopped at Opus 4 because YRP was so dominant in our area. People just said, "We're done."
Yeah, I don't blame them. I understand that feeling.
Yeah, we're done. It's just not. It's not fun to play. You know, one guy's playing this one deck and nobody's changing up. It also came to the point where I actually had to talk to my best friend about it. It's like, look, like, because we want to play the game. Everyone wants, you know, people who enjoy the game, people who collect it, they want to play the game. They want to enjoy the game. You know, me at the time, I was playing Sky Pirates, but I was playing a build I made specifically not to be so consistent as to make it so other people can't enjoy the game. You know, I wasn't used, you know, I still had the Leviathans, I still had the Bismarcks, had Lakshmis, but I wasn't playing the good summons in the lineup to make it as oppressive. You know, I wasn't playing all the Miracle Wind stuff so hey, restand, keep casting, keep going, and make your opponent hate their life as you take a 15-minute Yu-Gi-Oh turn.
Yeah. So that being said, it's not like I couldn't do it in the deck, but Joey played Broskin from the second he was able to build it, and for 3 Saturdays was incredibly dominant, and nobody could actually deal damage to him. The only time I dealt damage to him is when he literally just wanted to use his EX burst to kill me off, which is disrespectful, but also understandable because it goes to show just how powerful that deck is in the right hands. Yeah,
but
finish your point.
I was about to say casually. What about the people who were casually playing? You know, doing bracket. Because hey, bracket on Saturdays, we're all playing together because everyone gets together to play, right? Because you know, how does it feel for someone who we helped build a deck? You know, so I dropped the giant box of the giant 5K of bulk, build a deck. Take what you want. You know, here's my binder. Take what you want. If there's something I have an issue with, I will let you know. You know, players like that I helped get to the game, and all of a sudden can't play the game because you can't have forwards, can't deal damage because you aren't able to commit stuff to the board, can't commit stuff to the board because Broska burns through everything. Or on the flip side, because Folka's dropped, you know, it's not as bad because Bosher got hit. You know, people stopped playing. People started playing Broska and Twins and stuff like that. But Folka just disappeared, right?
Yeah.
From a casual, but how about the casual players who, you know, enjoy the game, but they don't feel like they can actually play the game? Does that make sense? You know, stuff like a Mad Rossi's now $30 and is a staple in Fire, you know, and it's practically in some circles, people say it's practically necessary to be able to survive some of these shenanigans. Stuff like, you know, Leviathan is the 3-drop Mobius Leviathan now, the one that says you can cancel action abilities. You know, Mist Dragon, which did get reprinted, but Leviathan and Mad Rossi, which didn't. You know, these cards you consider staples and element to be stuff that allows you to survive these strategies and be able to come back, you know, going back to the earlier discussion that Justin had, be able to come back from a, you know, disadvantage, you know, are hard to come by and aren't getting, you know, Mad Rosu, I can understand, you know, we have re-raise, but what about people who aren't playing competitively? You know, what if, you know, a lot of people like to play Final Fantasy because it's cheap, or, you know, they like to collect cards, they like collecting their favorite characters from the game. You know, when you drop a deck at the table and all of a sudden your opponent is making Voltron or they slam Exodia down, you know, what is being done, you know, to make sure we're getting cards in the hands of our fellow players who want to be able to play the game from a casual standpoint?
Do you have a recommendation for that, or do you have like what do you think could help that, make that more enjoyable for them? Well, and maybe it's not an easy answer. Maybe it's a massive design change, or is there a simple solution?
Well, honestly, let's be honest. Like, we have the anniversary kit. I recommend it to every person who wants to get the game. Hey, get the anniversary kit. 240, 250 cards, somewhere in that area.
Yeah, somewhere around that.
Yeah, it's a big amount. Gets you a starter deck. It gets you Mist Dragons. Gets you Shantotos. It gives you like the all-star cast from 1 to 12.
Yeah,
and it's missing something very important in my eyes. You know. Hey, hold on. Like, we have reprints from Opus 12, but wait, hold on. Where's the Mad Rossi?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I actually have the Golbez Cecil, the starter pack here, just like some of the base cards. And it's kind of funny that we still have stuff like this Kukulane from Opus 2 in there, or they'll put in stuff like this Monk from Opus 1, just to, and I'm always just so kind of scratching my head at like, why are they still slapping in these old cards that no one would ever put like in a deck, for real, but they're still slapping them in the starter kits.
Like, I get that from a design standpoint, but if we were going to talk about how mediocre Gomez versus Cecil is, I don't think it was I think it was would have been a good start had some of the cards in that set been a lot better, But then we have stuff like the Noctis deck that's coming out like before Researches of Power, and with the spoilers we've seen already, it's absolutely bonkers. Like, one of my friends who I've been trying to help build, Choco Bros, since he's gotten to our scene.
Yeah.
I straight up dropped he was trying to build Cat 15. It's like, here you go, Kingsglaive. I'll hold you off till we're able to get you the stuff to build Choco Bros. And all of a sudden the deck comes out, and I slam my hand on the table. You're building this deck. We have everything you need to make this deck good. We've got Gudon. I know people don't like Gudon, but you can't, it's a target. We got the Y'shtolas, we got the Iris, which is in color. We got you, bro. And then you just look at it like, then you compare it to Golbez versus Cecil, and it's just like, man. They did this man dirty. The best card in the deck is the Golbez and the Zemus.
The Rydias, I've seen some people use the Rydia too. Rydia always seems to get solid cards. They do seem, well, and that's another thing too that, I've mentioned forever, and everybody knows this, they really seem to favor certain characters. Like, certain characters just don't seem to be allowed to get mediocre cards. And other ones are only ever allowed to get mediocre cards.
It's one of 7, you would think. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry.
So tell me how Opus 17's been treating you so far. You enjoying it, not enjoying it? How's your crew feeling about it?
Well, I can tell you one thing. The one guy in my crew that plays a lot of tribals does not like Opus 17.
Because of Shadow Lord, yeah.
Because of Shadow Lord. He was making changes to his Warrior Light deck, and one of the decks I have is Earth Wind combo. It's I got the Thieves, I got the Alchemists. It's just, hey, flip, get set up, then drop Shikaries, and then I have the Noelle now to be able to search everything. For me, it's a very fun deck. I get to do all this interacting with my deck. But for my opponent, it's not like I'm making a 10-minute turn, but I have all these setup plays, and and then with the new Noelle, it says, hey, you can search any forward in your deck. You can deal damage to your opponent if need be, which is also one of the ways I killed him. Damage 6, Noelle was banished. It's like, do you have Amaterasu in hand? No. Yeah, that's game. That's game. I have Y'shtola and I can buffer to 11k.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think that's a fun. Noelle's a good card. Shadow Lord's a good card, and I'd argue that having watched my friend drop 7 forwards on me and me Shadow Lord in response, because but I also feel like, hey, Shadow Lord's a fantastic card now. The damage it deals you, it's insignificant in a game where the only penalty for taking damage is your opponent gets better seating from a competitive standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Which is also something that was kind of weird to me. Like, when I was actually playing at Re-Race, that the only advantages you get for actually dealing damage to your opponent is the seating. But we at the start, everyone thought we had enough time for best of 3. And I know best of 3 is not something that's traditionally for Final Fantasy. A lot of it's best of 1 or it's best of 3-2 deck, which I believe one of the recent re-rays was best of 3-2 deck, or at least one of the recent big events.
The Pennsylvania one, was a 2-deck format throughout the whole thing.
Yeah. Me and my locals, we tried 2-deck once, and it just ended up being both players take their decks that are really, really strong, and they swap to the next deck. And if your opponent has a weak deck, they started with the weaker deck or the deck that has the worst matchup.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of get locked into it. When me dropping Thieves, stealing cards atop my opponent's deck so they can't be as consistent as they want to, and then swapping to Earthwind combo and starting with all Shikaries in my hand. By the way, 0.03 repeating chance for that to happen.
To what, get all the chicories?
0.316%, I believe, all chicories form it. Yeah. So it was at that point I was like, man, this it doesn't solve the problems people have in the game, which is best of one format, no side decking, being able, having to choose consistency over tech choices that can, et cetera, et cetera. But it allows people to have quote unquote better matchups. But best of 3-2 deck says if you win the game, you swap decks. So if you just swap deck to a deck that has a better matchup against what you're fighting, you just sweep.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I do wish design-wise we were more flexible in general. It's always kind of bothered me how rigid the design aspect of this game is. For example, even something as simple as a ban. I don't understand why the ban list is always looked at with this permanence of you could ban something for one opus, and then if one opus later it's fine, okay, so bring it off of it. Why not try adding side decking or best of 3 format for normal Swiss? And if we hate it, okay, well, swap back. We tried it, didn't really work out for whatever X, Y, and Z. It I don't know. I just find it strange that we always tend to look at this stuff with, well, once it's banned, that's it. It can never ever come off that list. It's gone forever. Or no, once you add side decking, you can never go back. Like, but why not? Why can't we try it and then say, yeah, this did work out, this didn't work out, and then, but maybe that's just me.
Hey, we have some cards that they've been printing that are actually have printed that are fantastic for side decking. There's off the top of my head, Mog 6, the new one from 17. Hey, actionability, put Mog 6 in the break zone. Your opponent can't search for the turn. You know what? That's a fantastic side deck card. I think the Odin, one of the 2-drop Odins that says you can break a forward cost 2 or less, and if you've taken a damage, you can break a forward cost 4 or less. Yeah, the Opus 15 hero. Yeah. Yeah, and the Opus 13 Odin, the one that says, if you are damage 5, it comes 3 less. EX burst, break a forward cost 5 or less. Fantastic side deck cards. If you think, because not every deck is going to want to have their big removal, because you never know what you want to play, and there's no guarantee you're ever going to be at damage 5, especially in like lightning or wind. Lightning wind. I don't even know if people play that.
Two perfect examples of that in ice. One is Sid Randell, who will destroy certain matchups, but is worthless against others. He'd be fantastic to have in a side deck. And then one of my favorite choices would be the Zalira summon, the 1-drop, because, again, against the right matchup, it's incredible. It's some of the best removal you could have. But against soirees or other matchups, it's completely worthless. So I would love to have that card in my Fire Ice 6 and be able to swap. Oh, I'm going against soirees? Okay, let's get rid of the Zalira. Oh, I'm going against twins? Okay, I'll bring the Zalira back in. Like, that would be pretty cool, I think.
Oh, yeah, but let's also be honest. Zalira is also fantastic. Zalira is still a nice choice for main decking too. Soirees still play your Stola because it's an element. You still play their 3-drops. They still play their 7-drops. They still have access to their board wipes. I don't think Zalira is a bad choice, but it's also a fantastic. Just like you said, it's also a fantastic side deck card. Sid Randall, which God, I wish you were better. I wish you were better.
Yeah, I wish so too. I think if he just had more power, that alone could have made him.
It was Opus 13.
Yeah. But anyway, so that's that. Anything else you wanted to mention about Opus 17?
Opus 17. Actually, there's one thing I was disappointed by.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's something that people really talk about. I want to actually. Opus 17. We are going to Opus 16 now.
Okay.
It's a comparison. So Opus 16, I feel, was one of the best sets for people who are casually playing, who haven't gotten into the game before, who wanted to be able to play the game, be able to make decks. You have Shujins, you had Soirees, you could get into the game with, you could buy a box of 16 and you could make Soiree Shujin right off the rip. It's rainbow, everything works, you have forwards to play. It's not the most powerful, but not only is it a deck, you have your backup line, you have everything. It was absolutely admirable that they not only do we have 2 new deck sets that I'm going to be very excited for whenever we possibly, come on Hobby Japan, I know you're listening somewhere, possibly get the 14 versions of the Shujins, possibly, or soirees, if we get, like FFBE, Brave Exvius, Neovisions, et cetera, getting different versions of these cards and different strategies. I think soirees are probably at a point where they'd have to reprint the entire lineup for them to be relevant again, and I don't think that's bad from design standpoint, but Shujins, but other than that, like, also Kingsglaive was 15, 15, 16 been fantastic for decks, but 17 feels very weird. Like, it's a fantastic set for us who play competitively because, hey, we're getting these fantastic staples. We're getting Hooded Man. We're getting Man in Black. We're getting the X-Death. Lightning is eating good, baby. But then you look at you get the Shadow Lord that says, hey, a Mobius and 11. So, we getting really nice Mobius tribal and 11 tribal now. But also, hey, the game from the casuals' favorite decks, tribal decks, because let's be honest here, 14 players, they love their favorite jobs.
Sure.
Me, my name's Lance Pierson. You know why? I'm a Dragoon. But we get all these good cards from a competitive standpoint, but you get all these good cards, these decks are getting stronger, but it feels very weird from people who enjoyed these other decks or anything like that, where, hey, we're not really getting anything here, and it brings me to the point where I think dual starters are a fantastic way of getting people to the game, and powerful starter decks aren't bad. Look at custom starter, look at Avalanche, now look at the new Noxus starter, right? But the main sets sometimes leave a lot to be desired, and having alternate strategies getting supported in side sets may also fix the issue with it feeling like you start a new set and you don't know what to play. And which I feel also ends up being a common issue in some locals, but I'm only saying this in my experience from my locals.
Sure. Well, I have no locals to base anything off of, so I'm happy to hear your experience because.
Womp womp. I'm sorry.
No, I mean it's and one big part of it was the pandemic, and then a lot of folks just moved on to other games. 2 guys went on to Flesh and Blood because they're like, well, they're actively supporting it with tournaments and prizing and all this other stuff. So, yeah, unfortunately, the old STL locals are dead as a doornail.
Oh God, let's not talk about Flesh and Blood. So one of the biggest Flesh and Blood supporters in my area, they bought fleshandblood.com, as in not like F&B. They bought fleshandblood.com before the official Flesh and Blood company,
Oh, really? That's funny.
Yes. Compete Esports. They lost. They said something unsavory on stream when they were streaming the game. Not about like, hey, I said something blah, 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 blah. No, they said something about the game that the lead designers didn't agree with, and they just got cut off. Like, which I found to be kind of weird, because that also meant the entirety of the Flesh and Blood scene in my area also died. Like,
oh, jeez.
The people, like, I'd go to Compete. Like, I'm gonna be honest here. Compete had a huge pre-release for Monarch. I topped 8 in the pre-release because I ended up building Prism. Fantastic deck. We're talking about Flesh and Blood now. I'm sorry. So this is more of a, but the scene there died for Flesh and Blood because they said something, and I feel like that is something that only should happen when the players decide.
Yeah,
that
like, sucks if a store or some outside force does it when the players are still willing.
Yeah, like it's not like they didn't go elsewhere, but them having an active Flesh and Blood scene, them selling the product, them selling the product and bringing people in, them being not my favorite store but still a good store to go to, it kind of sucks because what's stopping Square Enix say, hey, don't sell to these guys anymore. Hey, I also know distributors make something like that make it much more difficult, but yada yada, et cetera. It's not, but this goes back to the point about the locals. What happens when your locals just shrivels up and dies? You want to support this game, keep playing this game, and all of a sudden there's no real casual support for the game. Drafting feels dead from a casual viewpoint because sets aren't made to draft with, and there's no drafting support to be able to encourage these formats so people can play casually in their free time to get more people into the game.
Yeah, I've often heard from other players too asking about different formats, and for me it just seems very difficult to get anyone to really commit to anything besides standard, which maybe is the natural result of, you know, when you have a game with a small player base like this anyway, is that, well, there's few of us as is, so of course we just want to play the mode that lets us play everything. If they were ever to push another mode, personally, I'd like to see Title. One, I think that fits in thematically with that, you know, it's your favorite Final Fantasy game. And two, I think it's the most fun because you get to kind of break some of the rules. But yeah, I can't remember the last time I saw a draft, maybe at the 2019 World Stream.
God. Right? Like, and I also feel like drafting and stuff like that is a great way to bring in casual players, you know, stuff like side sets, stuff like that. They help with the casual scene as well, because now a lot of I'll bring up Yu-Gi-Oh! I don't like to bring up Yu-Gi-Oh! a lot, but one of the things Yu-Gi-Oh! Excels really well at is when they bring out a side set. Hey, here's these new strategies you can try that, you know, might get supported in the main set later on. Like me, I played a lot of Invokes. You know, I built Invokes when Fusion Forces dropped. You know, Invokes is one of my favorite decks, you know, and then they bring out more Invoke support later on. Game, you know, it's fine, you know, I'm not going to say anything about Yu-Gi-Oh! That's not, you know, but it helps people get into the game. It's a good place for people to start, and you don't have to, you know, I feel like it's something that Final Fantasy has been missing for a while, where I don't think it might shake anything up on a meta level, and if it does, okay, that's fine. But having dual starters and custom starters are nice, because, you know, people can get into the game, you know, have these stronger decks. What about people who just want to buy product and open up packs, you know, see what they have, you know? That is something that people also have to think about when they're, you know, selling the game, you know? Like my shop, you know, me and my best friend, we bought out the 13, the 12, the 14, you know, most of the 15 when it dropped. You know, and we had a pretty decent player base, but now it's just like people get to this rut of, I don't know what to play, and, you know, maybe you know, because a lot of the people who play are also our friends, so it's like, maybe I'll just end up playing Digimon or anything like this. Hey, this has something I want to actually play, like, you know, it's supported better, and it just ends up running back to, I don't know what to play. Other games are supporting what I want to do better. Spur of the moment, Riku and Dataluma don't need to be banned. The game has progressed to a point where Dataluma is not good anymore.
Yeah, he's an interesting one. I'd be curious to see what it would be. I mean, he was still very annoying though. He was still an incredibly annoying card. Riku, I don't know, man. There's a lot more reactivation now than ever before. I would hate to see her just getting to do her thing.
A lot of reactivation now than ever before, but she still has the worst thing ever for a card to be purchased with for her to be good,
which is
it's an S ability that doesn't have a replacement effect.
Yeah, but she has a non-S ability. She can just use her action ability to mill you.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, that's what made her straight. It wasn't the S ability. The S ability was like a bonus mill, but she just normally milled you out anyway.
Yeah, but oh yeah, because she just tapped and just milled cards off the top, right?
Yeah, I think she just had to dull and pay a wind.
Yeah, that's a little toxic, but you know, that also brings us back into the, hey, alternate win conditions are good for a game. You know, we were talking about that earlier with Folka and Braska. You know, it's like, you know, you have to commit forwards to play the game. You don't have forwards on the field. Decks have alternate win conditions, or alternate win conditions that end up being, you know, good to play. You know, nobody's going to bounce my Thief that mills you 4 or 2. They're going to bounce Paul, but they're not going to bounce the one that does on ETB. Right. They're going to block it for sure, but if they have to bounce it, you know, Tross. Oh, we're going back to 16 meta. Tross. You know, if Tross get forced to. Moshri's not going to do it. You're not going to waste the cards on that. You're going to wait till something prominent comes up and you're going to deal the damage. And if you have to, you're going to see all your stuff hit the break regardless, and that may help Moshri, but it's not helping, you know, et cetera, et cetera. You know, as soon as you run out of cards in deck, game over. Game over, man. Game over. It doesn't matter on damage 6. You have 0 cards in your deck. GG, easy.
Very true.
One thing.
Yes.
This actually came up at Re-Raise, and I discussed it with Justin.
Okay.
remember correctly, Justin is the friend I brought. When they announced that time per round was shortened from an hour to 30 minutes, and it was weird because everyone thought they were doing, most of the people who were there, who were new to the scene, who had probably been doing best of 3 with their scenes, they re-announced the rules like 30 minutes, best of 1. It's like, everyone's like, ooh, hold on a second here. That surprised a lot of people because a lot of other games have best of 3 formats.
Yeah.
Even if they don't have side decking, because I honestly feel best of 3 is healthy for a game. It's not even if you don't have side decking, because games of luck and games of chance, having an additional, it's a lot different having a best of 1 and, you mulligan and you get a worse hand.
Right.
You could always argue that, consistent deck building makes things stronger, but
you can still brick in consistent decks. Yeah, it happens all the times. No, yeah, a best of 3 undeniably gives a better chance to let the better player win, whereas a best of 1 is always going to have higher variance.
Yeah, like my best friend Joey, who ended up getting Fusoya looped at re-raise, and his entire hand, he drew nothing but forwards and Braska. He was playing Magisa Braska, and he drew nothing but forwards, and all of the X-bursts were forwards.
Ouch.
So, oops, all forwards in Braska, and no Braskas. So that's also, I'm not going to say that, playing Braska and stuff like that, you deserve to auto lose, but in a best of 3 situation, it would have been a much different outcome because if you remember correctly, re-raise one, Soul Rays were 8 out, what was it, 8 out of 16?
It was half. Yeah, I think it was 8 of the 16.
8 out of 16. But the winner was Fire Ice Knights, so I was just like, yay, they're Knights with only 2 Knights on the deck. But all shenanigans aside, best of the fact that time rules is double loss instead of high, dealt damage, the person who's take the highest damage losing is IMO better for the game than time of the round. You lose both, it's better for, double loss is better than time of the round, lowest damage loses, because then you have people trying to rule shark, and slow play in order to drag the game out in order to win when they know their deck's not doing well. And that's something that's plagued other card games that do similarly. I believe it's Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh!, some of the most popular card games in the country, if not the world, where at a competitive level, people will time you out if they don't think they can get the win with the cards they have in their hand.
But wouldn't damage prevent that? Like, if you're losing to me and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to try to stall you out now. If you have more damage than me winning once the time runs out because I have less damage, wouldn't that prevent that? You would have no incentive to play slowly because you're just hurting yourself because I'm going to win anyway when the time goes.
Well, a double loss also means, it is both players, get the worst result.
Right, but why is that better? Again, because in my scenario, I would win anyway, which I should because I've dealt you more damage. There is at least some control over that, whereas just arbitrarily saying, well, they just both lose, there's no one gets to influence that decision. Allow me to give you one of the most common used examples I have ever seen in any group for people complaining about the time rules. Okay, go ahead. Yu-Gi-Oh players, there are 5 minutes left in a round. Your opponent starts to read every card on the field and in their hand and in each graveyard to check the board state. That's legal. When you play something else, your opponent reads it and checks it. Mm-hmm. Time of the round in Yu-Gi-Oh means whoever has the highest life points wins. Right? Fair. You activated Solemn Judgment this turn to gate one of their effects. Mm-hmm. That means all they have to do is stall 5 minutes and they win. That's double loss, forces both players to interact for someone to get the win. Yeah, but I don't think that's an argument against a single determinative winner. That sounds like an argument against crappy players. That's the player who's slowing you down. That's not a problem of the game. Like, that's a crummy player just trying to stall you out. In a casual setting, yes. In a competitive setting, each person is there to win. That means you do what you need to win. If you can get away with it and it wins you the game, it's not scummy. Well, it's still scummy, but
no, you can't argue that. You could argue they're slow playing, but that's not something that comes up in Final Fantasy.
Mhm.
Well, all the players in our scene, at least, is gracious enough to accept their losses, but also there are 8. Besides, I'm not going to bring that up. Besides, if time of the round is called, we still have extra turns.
Mhm.
There was one guy. The first round of Re-Raise 1 had, I believe it was the other Sky Pirates player. God bless him. Thank you. The other Sky Pirates player who, like me, made a very, very unfortunate choice of playing Sky Pirates at a giant Folka event. But regardless, they still went all through, and they were still able to win. With the extra time of the time of the round was called, and he was still able to push damage. The issue with you winning immediately once time is called, if I've taken more damage than you have, and we've had a more interactive game, or a less interactive game, is that, say I'm at damage 5 and you're at damage 4.
Mhm.
So it's 2 minutes left in the round, and I'm making plays, and as soon as time is called, that's it, game over. You get the victory. It's on my turn. I still haven't been able to get to my attack phase. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but you got to determine a winner somehow, right? So right now, you get your 30 minutes, and then each player gets, I think, 2 turns each. Turn 0, 1, 2, 3. And then
I believe it's three turns, and at the end of the last turn,
Well, and then if there's no winner determined at that point, if there still isn't a clear winner, you would quote unquote be awarded a double loss. But usually what happens is someone will either just concede to the other person or they'll roll a die. And at that point, I don't understand why that is better, why rolling a die or someone just saying, okay, why is that better than just looking at damage, looking at the board state and saying this person's ahead, they're declared the winner.
We can't trust the player base to always make the best decisions for sportsmanship. We always go into a competitive setting wanting the best out of sportsmanship. We reward sportsmanship. We applaud it, but at the end of the day, somebody's going to want to win this event more than the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And having a rule, I know a lot of people. This isn't something that's come up. It hasn't come up yet. Haven't seen anyone talk about it. The only thing I've even complained about at our locals is that they didn't tell us beforehand what the format was, because I built Sky Pirates for best of 3,
mm-hmm.
not best of 1. And if I was building a deck for best of 1, or was playing a deck for best of 1, I would have brought Dragoons instead, because Dragoon Toolbox says I'm just going to deal damage. I'm just going to hasty boys and then drop the big stuff you have to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of time it takes I've lost track, but I know it's just we want to play a game where both players feel like their time isn't wasted. But if you incentivize running down the clock, mm-hmm. and determining a clear winner point wise, then people are always going to do that. Vanguard does the same thing. You get the same amount of time. You get the same amount of time, same amount of turns, no clear winner, both players lose. But it's up to the player base, players to decide, are we getting a double loss or who's going to concede? Even if it's left to a die roll, it's still an interactive process between both players. The issue with it being, okay, both players damage, is that someone could just stall the time. All of a sudden, now we have turns and somebody has to force damage because, hey, now we're at the center of the room. Everyone's looking at us because we're Final Fantasy players. It is time of the round. Get your regalias revving because we need to get the round 2. And now you have to deal damage in the situation where either your opponent has stalled enough to get the time, and even if we stay at 4 or 5, that's close, no cigar, if damage gets a 5 and stuff like that. Even if the opponent's deck, like say we have cards like the Whale, we have Seymour, it's just okay, boom, double damage, that's game.
Yeah.
It leads people to make decks that are more so revolve around exploiting time rules, which isn't an interactive experience for the players in bracket.
You say that, but I've never seen that in my experience. Perhaps I'm just not being privy to it, but I've never seen people play for time like that. Most games tend to finish before time.
You haven't played Yu-Gi-Oh! Then?
Well, no, I haven't played it I only played it when it first came out. But this isn't Yu-Gi-Oh! Though; it's Final Fantasy.
Yeah, it is. But the issue ends up being with having it as double loss means people don't make those decks. People don't make the decks when you look at the deck list, like, how does this guy win? we've had these discussions in our player base, in our player groups. Like, how did this guy win? We could look at the card base, stuff like that. And it's like, okay, yeah, he had a diverse enough forward line. I looked at Ice Fire Knights. I was like, how did this guy win? Joey's like, I'd burnt this guy to death with Broska, and then he still wins the event. It's not like he's not the good player. That's not saying anything bad about you, guy. You're fantastic winning re-raise. Good job on you. You had to, but it's like we look at it, it's like, okay, diverse enough forward count. You always can play cards. You always, you have Cephalus to be able to banish stuff. You continue playing cards, be able to get free advantage off of using stuff you had beforehand. You have Squall to deal with issues. You have True Caspel because you're in fire. You have Meath to be able to search your stuff out. It ends up being, okay, we see all these things and we understand why you win. Now, then I compare it to my Yu-Gi-Oh experiences. Like one of the decks that won one of the YCS was Mystic Mind Burn. Mystic Mind is a card that shuts down. Mystic Mind is a card that shuts down all interaction between both players. And it being burn, time of the round, person with the highest life points wins.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel from a competitive standpoint and from a game design standpoint, the designers of the game need to promote interaction between players and cards instead of creating an environment where players don't get to interact with each other. I may not like Broska as a card because it burns all my forwards to death, but it still is interaction between cards, and I still have to think about how I'm going to handle the situation. If that interaction is taken from me, and now I have to wonder about, hey, time's calling around, and if time's calling around, and I am 1-3 versus Broska, and I have 2 cards in hand, I'm conceding. I'm not winning that battle if he has 4 cards or more. But that's just me,
Yeah.
But control decks do better at time, which is, Final Fantasy is infamous for having decks are all aggro, go, 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 best of one format, all aggro, go, go, go,
mm-hmm.
mid-range. We've talked about it with Mr. Whitefish. I've talked about Mr. Whitefish a long time ago. Aggro is an integral part of the game. It is very, and it's also good because 7 damage. We can't ever. Aggro being bad means we've gotten to a point where stuff is interacted with without you being able to do anything about it. One of the strong points I love about Final Fantasy is when you play a card on the field, if something gets added to the stack, that card is inherent protection against anything your opponent wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
If you just play nothing but forwards that have haste and your opponent can't interact with it, your opponent may not like it, but my cards are protected unless you have something that can deal with it immediately. Until at the end of main phase.
Well, that was good food for thought. I appreciate that perspective. Lance, thank you so much for joining me today. Anyone you want to give a shout out to or mentions or follows on Twitter or whatever?
Shout out to my friend Benji. He's been having a difficult time here lately, and I hope he ends up watching this video.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us, folks. If you like what you see here, feel free to like and subscribe. Maybe donate to that Patreon link. If you don't like, I appreciate you watching nonetheless. Lance, thank you for being my guest today, and until next time, take care.
Next time. Doo-doo.